You're slowly stirred awake by the distant ringing as the phone beside your bed pulls you out of your dreams. Your thoughts gather themselves and you groan, reaching over to answer. As soon as you place the phone to your ear, you're greeted by background noise consisting of twisting screams. People in agonizing pain, begging for help or death. Not that the interference allows you to hear any individual voice clearly enough. Get out of the house now. The call ends abruptly after what you could have sworn was a voice from closer than on the other end. You shift yourself to the side of the bed, sighing while rubbing your eyes. A call this startling and this early in the morning would keep you awake. Your wife shuffles to the side, apparently also woken by the call. She wraps her arms around you and kisses a light kiss on the neck. Don't worry about it, her half-asleep mumble calms you down somewhat. Just as you're about to place the phone down, it rings again. You fumble slightly and drop it. Instead, you feel your wife's arms tightening around you, preventing you from leaning forward. It's then you notice a subtle difference between the arms around you and the familiarity of your wife's. He's too late to save you anyway. When you are admitted to a hospital, they place on your wrist a white wristband with your name on it, but there are other different colored wristbands which symbolize other things. The red wristbands are placed on dead people. There was one surgeon who worked on a night shift in a school hospital. He had just finished an operation and was on his way down to the basement. He entered the elevator and there was just one other person there. He casually chatted with the woman while the elevator descended. When the elevator door opened, another woman was about to enter when the doctor slammed the door closed and punched the button to the highest floor. Surprised, the woman reprimanded the doctor for being rude and asked why he did not let on the other woman. The doctor said, "That was the woman I just operated on. She died while I was doing the operation. Didn't you see the red wristband she was wearing?" The woman looked at him and smiled. She raised her arm and said, "Something like this one?" "I'm the last one here. Those things have killed everyone else. Those things with the huge wings, with the beady eyes, with the sharp claws. Every time I close my eyes, I see my co-workers being ripped apart. A few of us have made it to the building here, but even here, we aren't safe. I watched them get picked off one by one, screaming as they fought against death. I tried to stop it. I swear I tried. I really did try. Now I'm running through the building to the main power center. With no one else to ask, I'm tasked with pressing one of these buttons. Either I will press the red button or the green button. Supposedly, one of the buttons will turn the power doors back on, protecting us from whatever that shrieking, hungry and angry thing is outside. That's the red button. The other button is green and opens the opposite side power door, and I can only imagine what might be out there. Why have I agreed to come and research in this lab? I think as I run, hearing the screeching behind me. Oh God, why? Why did I lie on my application? Why didn't I just admit that I was colorblind? I am currently sitting in front of my computer, for now, scared out of my mind. Every moment could be my last moment, but I wanted to record this story to let everybody know what's going on. My friend is here with me, and he's the sole reason why my life is in danger. It may not make sense at first, but let me try and explain as best I can. It all started earlier today when a friend of mine burst into my house and slammed the door behind him. His eyes were wide with fear as he stood there with his back against the door, breathing heavily. I asked him what he had done and what happened, so he decided to tell me the story. I wish he had never told me this story. The story began that he had been living with his aunt for the past year because his parents were in Mexico. They were doing mission work at a small hospital in southern Mexico. The previous night, there was a strange man who had stumbled through the entrance of the hospital. He was screaming in Spanish and appeared to be out of his mind with terror. They brought him over to a chair and let him sit down. As he caught his breath, he told the story in broken English. He claimed that his sister had been killed by something he referred to as Lalo Blanco. He kept saying that it was coming for him next. Confused, they asked him who or what a Lalo Blanco was. With a look of fear on his face, he said that Lalo Blanco was the White Death. She is the soul of a girl who died years ago. She died by her own hand, he said, alone and unloved. She hated life so much that she wanted to remove all traces of herself from the earth. So great was her desire to completely remove her memory that she returned from the dead as a vengeful spirit bent on killing all those who knew of her existence. She is a girl, but not a girl, he said. She's not dead, but not really alive. She has cold, black eyes that weep blood. She walks without ever actually seeming to move an inch. She stalks her victims like a wild animal, pursuing them across rivers and valleys, trailing them back to their homes. You are never really aware that she is following you until you hear the telltale knock upon your door. She knocks once for your skin, which she'll use to patch her own decaying flesh, twice for your hair, which she'll gnash between her teeth, 3 times for your bones, which she'll fashion into clubs, 4 times for your heart, which she'll tear out of your chest, 5 times for your teeth, which she'll polish and keep in a box, 6 times for your eyes, which she'll pluck one by one, 7 times for your soul, which she'll swallow whole. No matter where you go, the White Death will track you down, and you will hear her terrible knocking begin on the door. You can try and outrun her, but she's faster than any mortal man. If you flee from your home while she's knocking on your door, she will follow you wherever you will go. The terrified man was certain that this thing had killed his sister. He had tried to tell the police about the White Death, but they would not listen, dismissing it as an old wives' tale. Next, he had tried to tell his priest, but the priest immediately shut the door of the church in his face and turned him away. The priest had seen the White Death following him, he said, and did not want to get involved. With his head in his hands, the frightened man said that the White Death follows you forever until you tell someone else about it. Then it strikes. It kills you and begins following the person you told. After finishing his tale, the man stole a car from the Mission Hospital parking lot and vanished into the night. Apparently, my friend's mother and father had immediately called his aunt and told her about the strange man they had encountered, to find out if she had any chance heard of this story of the White Death. She said no, and she's never heard about it. So they proceeded to tell her the story that the man had told them. The aunt had gotten a phone call later that night. It was the Mexican police. They told her that the parents had been found dead outside the hospital. They'd been torn apart. My friend's aunt had immediately called him at school to break the bad news to him. As he cried, she told him she couldn't understand what had happened. She recounted the whole story to him, telling him about the strange man who turned up at the hospital just hours before his parents were found dead. She told him how the man had given his parents a weird and disturbing story about something called the White Death. When he hung up the phone, he had struggled to come to terms with what had happened. It almost didn't seem real to him. So when he got home after school, he found the front door of his aunt's house standing open. Inside was a trail of blood leading into the kitchen. There on the kitchen floor, he found his aunt's dead body. She'd been torn limb from limb. He ran out of the house and all the way across town, never looking back until he reached my house. As he told me this story, I could hardly believe it. Within the space of a day, his mother, his father, and his aunt had all been murdered. and it seemed all too far-fetched. But before I could utter a word, my friend and I both recoiled in horror as we heard a knocking begin at my front door. We've been staring at the door for an hour now, neither of us wanting to open it. The knocking is still going on, growing louder and louder. She never gives up. She never quits. Lalo Blanco is unstoppable. I think she wants to scare us, my friend and I. I think she wants us to blame each other, and I do. I blame my friend. It's all his fault. He should never have told about her. So as I sit here in my house beside my friend, in front of my computer, telling this story, we're still sitting here listening to that hideous knocking growing even louder. I wish a lot of things. I wish he had killed my friend before he reached my house. If he had never been able to tell me about her, I wouldn't be in danger now. I'm sorry that I even met him. I wish that he was dead. Sounds terrible, but this wouldn't be happening if he was. And now, I'm sorry for you too. I'm sorry that you listened to this story. I'm sorry that I ever told you about the White Death, because now that you know about her, she'll be coming for you next. So be prepared to hear a lot of knocking. The children were excited. Their favorite uncle was coming to visit. He was an adventurer, and his journeys had taken him to many mysterious and exotic places. His latest trip was to a remote region deep in the heart of Africa. The children could hardly wait to hear the tales he would tell. When their uncle arrived, he had a broad smile on his face. After he greeted their parents, the children dragged him into the living room and made him sit down. They begged him to tell the story about his recent adventures. "Very well," said the uncle. "I'll tell you about the most terrifying creature I have ever seen. We came across it in the most remote part of the jungle. It's a massive spider, almost half a meter in diameter. The most interesting thing about it is that this creature had a most peculiar survival tactic. It is a parasite. When it attacks its prey, it enters the animal through the mouth and crawls down into the belly. From there, it can take over the host's nervous system and control its movement, essentially rendering the host a useless puppet. It stays in the animal's body and feeds off it just long enough to plant its eggs. Then, it goes searching for a new host." The children's eyes widened. "What a fascinating creature," they exclaimed. "Imagine what would happen if it made its way here to Canada." "Well, perhaps it already has," their uncle said with a smile. He then cocked his head back, and terrible gagging noises came from his throat. As the children watched in horror, blood started pouring from his eyes, ears, and nose, and 8 long, spindly legs emerged from his mouth. We all fear things, but can we say we have experienced true fear? For example, you are downstairs on your computer when the news comes on the TV. You sit and watch intently as the newscaster tells you the scores of your favorite sporting events and the average cutesy story, followed by news on how the politicians have messed up. You're about to go to bed when the news comes back on. They're talking about knots caused by a massive breakout at the local prison. Murderers, rapists, and madmen are free and are roaming the town. You hear noises outside and duck down. Then turn off the TV and the computer, followed by all the lights so not as to attract the attention of the people outside. You slowly make it upstairs, moving quickly past your glass front door. And as you rush through the hall, you see the outlines of people slowly walking up your driveway. You hold your breath and sprint up the stairs, then run into your room, pull the curtain shut, and leap into bed and hide under your covers. You bury your head in the pillow and cry softly, hoping and praying that it'll be over soon, reassuring yourself over and over. However, Something unbeknownst to you is persistently nagging at your composure. You suddenly sit bolt upright as you hear something. Then at that exact moment, it dawns on you. The most horrific realization you could imagine, and you finally understand. You finally experience true fear. You didn't lock the door. Last night I had an itch that would not let me go to sleep, and I knew what it was. However, as hard as I tried, I could not reach it. So I stood up all night cursing the person that forgot to take my toe tag off before I was buried. When I was about 16 years old, I was riding horses with my friend in the field beside her house. The horse threw me, and I hit my head. I hit my head very, very hard. The next thing I know, I'm on my back in incredible pain, staring up at my friend. She's frantically screaming at me, dazed. My gaze shifted and refocused on her friend behind her. He was a tall, thin man wearing a black suit and an old-fashioned, wide-brimmed hat, long white hair, yellowish-colored teeth, and he was staring at me, unblinking, into my eyes, over my friend's shoulder. Days later, she came to visit me in the hospital, and I decided to ask her about the man I'd seen. I thought it was the new boyfriend that she recently told me about, which was strange because he seemed like he was a lot older than she was. She told me that there was no one there but me and her. A young boy is sleeping in his bed on a usual night. He hears footsteps outside his door and peeks out of his eyes to see what's happening. His door swings open quietly to reveal a murderer carrying the corpses of his parents. After silently propping them up on a chair, he writes something on the wall in the blood of the dead bodies. He then hides under the child's bed. The child is scared beyond belief. He can't read the writing on the wall, and he knows the man is under his bed. Like any child, he pretends that he slept through the whole thing and hasn't awoken yet. He lays still as the bodies, quietly hearing the breaths from under his bed. An hour passes, and his eyes are adjusting more and more to the darkness. He tries to make out the words, but it's a struggle. He gasps when he finally makes out the sentence, "I know you're awake." He feels something shift underneath the bed. A girl was sitting on the subway late one night, and she noticed that the woman sitting across from her was staring intently at her. The woman was sitting between two old men. The girl kept looking away, but the woman wouldn't break eye contact with her. The stare was beginning to freak the girl out. At the next stop, a new passenger got on. It was a tall man in a gray trench coat. He sat down next to the girl. The woman paid no attention to the man in the trench coat. She just kept staring at the girl, who was getting more and more creeped out as time went on. The two old men didn't even glance in her direction. She pretended not to notice, but each time she glanced at the strange woman, the stare continued. When the train was pulling into the next stop, the man in the trench coat got up to leave. Suddenly, he grabbed the girl's arm tightly as they opened the doors, and he dragged her off the train. The subway door shut and the train pulled off, leaving the girl alone on the platform with the man in the trench coat. She started screaming for help. "Calm down," said the man. "I just saved your life. I didn't mean to scare you, but I had to get you off that train. The woman sitting opposite you was dead, and the two men beside her were propping her up." When I was a kid, I would race up to the top of the stairs as fast as I could, like it was some sort of silly game. Well, I must have been 5 or 6 at the time. I'm not sure, but I know I was very little. Somewhere along the way, a voice at the top of the stairs started to whisper to me. It would make bets with me such as, "I bet you a penny you can't make it to the top of the stairs." I don't really think there was a certain amount of time or anything. As I said, I was pretty little, so I probably didn't have any counting abilities anyway. I recall just sitting at the top of the stairs having conversations with this voice, about the betting, of course. Eventually, the voice, it was like a whisper of a man's voice, not my own in my head, started to bet me my life. Instead of pennies, it would say, "I bet you your life you can't make it up the stairs." As I got older, it stopped. I never really thought about it at all. I never mentioned it to anyone. Until one night I was sleeping over at my brother's place, and we were talking about spooky stories. Out of nowhere, I brought up the voice at the top of the stairs, and my brother got all quiet. Before I even mentioned anything, he said, "Did it make bets with you too?" We both looked at each other, horrified. It was late, really late. I don't know why I keep doing things like this to myself, staying up until all hours of the night. Yet here I was, walking up my wooden basement stairs in the complete darkness, oppressing my thoughts and obtruding into my mind morbid images and scary whimsical thoughts of monsters. I chuckled as I reached the top of the stairs. It was ridiculous to believe in fairy tales. I started to shut the door behind me, but just as it was about to close, it sprung back open as it rebounded off of something squishy. I jumped back and with horror looked down. A sock was wedged under the door and prevented it from closing. I nervously chuckled and threw the sock down into the basement. Then it was thrown back, landing at my feet. The worst part is, I live alone. The lights flicker. I put the pillow over my head, so I won't hear the screams this time. One night, a young girl was sleeping in her bed when a spider crawled across her face. It stopped for a few minutes on her left cheek, then it went on its way. When she woke up the next morning and looked in the mirror, she noticed a red spot on her cheek. "What's this?" she asked her mother. "It looks like a spider bite," her mother replied. "It'll go away, just don't scratch it." Soon, the small red spot grew into a big red boil. "Look at it now," the girl said. "It's getting bigger." "Well, that sometimes happens," her mother said. "It's coming to a head." In a few days, the red spot was even larger. Look at it now," the girl said. "It hurts so much, and it makes me look so ugly." "Well, we'll have the doctor look at it," her mother said. "Maybe it's just infected." But the doctor couldn't see the girl until the next day. That night, she decided to take a nice, relaxing bath. As she lay soaking in the warm water, the boil suddenly burst. Out poured a swarm of tiny spiders from the eggs their mother had laid in her cheek. A Japanese girl traveled to Taiwan on holiday. She decided to stay in a cheap hotel to save money. When she got to her room and began to unpack, she realized that the hotel receptionist had given her room 66 on the 6th floor. A chill went down her spine. Technically, that was 666. While unpacking her things, she heard someone knocking at the door to her room. She opened the door, but there was nobody there. She poked her head out and looked around, but she did not see anyone in the corridor. The girl figured it was just her imagination, so she shut the door and resumed unpacking. Suddenly, there was another knock on the door. This time, when she opened the door, there was a woman standing outside wearing a red bathrobe. The strange woman was crying and shaking. She told the girl that she had accidentally locked herself out of her room. The strange woman also said she was having problems with her husband and she was really depressed. The girl felt sorry for the strange woman, so she offered to go down to the lobby and get a replacement key for her from the hotel receptionist. However, when the girl took the elevator down to the lobby, it was empty. She did not find anybody at reception. She rang the bell on the desk and waited. After a few minutes, the receptionist appeared, and the girl asked for a replacement key for the room of the woman in the red robe. Receptionist: the woman in the red robe? What woman in a red robe? Oh, this strange woman. She came to my room and she got locked out of her own room. What are you talking about? We only have one guest staying on the 6th floor today, and that's you. That can't be true. Can you check again? Oh, yeah, I know. You may not believe this, but it's true. There was a horrible tragedy. A few years ago, a woman was staying here. She was in room 66 on the 6th floor, the very room that you're staying in today. She and her husband split up and she wanted to commit suicide. But in her madness, she decided that she wanted everyone in the hotel to die with her. So she put on a white robe, and carrying a shotgun, she went from floor to floor shooting people. There was so much blood everywhere. It was horrible. She went insane, and there was so much blood that her white robe was stained red. Ever since that day, guests who stay on the 6th floor say they see her from time to time. The young girl was speechless. The receptionist smiled as she walked out from behind the desk and pointed to a red stain on her own stomach. Look, this is where she shot me. They call him the blind painter. He was an old man in his early 70s, and he lived in a small house on the edge of town. He was an acclaimed artist, but he had been completely blind since the day he was born. Despite his disability, he had painted some of the greatest works of art anyone had ever seen. People came from far and wide to have their portrait done by the blind painter. As long as they paid the requested fee, he would paint a portrait of anyone. Nobody knew how he was able to paint with such skill, even though he couldn't see the person sitting in front of him. It was an uncanny ability that defied logic. I arranged for him to paint my portrait one day. So, on the appointed day, I walked up to his house and knocked on the front door. When it opened, I saw the blind painter standing there, leaning on his cane. His face was drawn and wrinkled. His eyes were milky white. He invited me in, and I followed him as he shuffled down a long hallway. In his studio, I handed over an envelope containing his fee. He thanked me and told me to sit on a stool. He stood behind an easel with a blank canvas on it and picked up his paintbrush. "Before we begin, I must warn you," he said. "Sometimes I paint too far." I had no idea what he meant. His paintings were always beautiful, so I was sure I would be satisfied with the finished product. I sat there, adopting a pose, as he started painting. Hours passed and neither one of us said a word. The blind painter never looked up from his canvas. His brush traveled back and forth, and his brow was wrinkled in concentration. Finally, he put his brush down. "I am finished," he said, and beckoned for me to come over and take a look. As soon as I set my eyes on the painting, I was horrified. He had painted me lying on the ground, surrounded by a pool of blood. My throat had been sliced open, and my body was covered in stab wounds. My dead eyes were glazed over, and there was a look of terror frozen on my face. "Why?" I asked, stepping back in horror. "Why would you paint something like this?" The blind painter looked at me with his sad, milky white eyes. "I warned you," he said. "Sometimes I paint too far. Sometimes I paint the future." All set for the dinner date, she thought to herself as she looked up to look into the mirror, but somebody else was already there, standing in the mirror, smiling. A woman kept having recurring dreams in which a masked man was trying to kill her. The mask was very distinctive. It was spiked at the top with no eye holes, and it had a large zipper across the mouth. The mask was made of leather. One night, she had another nightmare. In the dream, she looked out her bedroom window and saw the masked man walking up to her in her garden path and towards her front door. She awoke from the nightmare, trembling with fear. Suddenly, she heard the doorbell ring. She grabbed her nightgown and ran downstairs. Cautiously, she opened the front door. There was nobody there. She looked down and saw the leather mask laying on the doorstep. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you'd like to, you can follow me at Twitter. The handle is @FuzzyPantaloons, and I'll see you all next time.